stillborn, neonatal death, miscarriages, hypertension, postnatal depression, anxiety. Black mothers are more likely in the UK at the moment. We are 3.4 times more likely to sadly die in our pregnancies. Why is that? Are we presenting perfection? Are we looking stronger? Are we not allowed to feel vulnerable?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Born Into podcast. I'm Isra, Chaker, CEO of Every Pregnancy, and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is about something that impacts every one of us, but isn't talked about nearly enough: the health of moms. Each week, we bring you stories of courage, crisis, hope, and facts from around the world about what it is like to be a mom, help a mom, or support a mom. Today, I am speaking to you from our studios here at the Every Pregnancy office and speaking with my incredibly inspiring colleague, Sandra Igwe, founder of the Motherhood Group, a powerful voice for Black mothers in the United Kingdom. Welcome, Sandra, all the way from London. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about our conversation that we're going to have today.
Me too. Well, let's just start off by first telling me a little bit about yourself. What is the best part of Sandra? What do you want our listeners to know about you?
Wow, have we got all day, all week?
Yes, I love
Okay.
that. Let's keep it going.
I'm Sandra Igwe, and I'm the founder of the Motherhood Group, as you said. But most importantly, I am a mum to three amazing girls who have absolutely changed my life dramatically for the better. There has been ups and there's been downs, but I wouldn't be where I am without my three wonderful girls, Zoe, Chloe, and Josie. I've got a 9-year-old, 7-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
Aw.
And the most amazing part, I guess, for me about being who I am is definitely the journey that I've taken over the last couple of years, where I think I've found a new version of myself, and motherhood has definitely helped shaped part of my identity, not all of it, but many aspects of it. And I've cried my way through some parts, but I've definitely danced and celebrated through others, which I'm happy to share with you later in this conversation.
Can you tell us a little bit more, Sandra, about that experience? And what do you feel like the experience of a Black mom compared to someone who doesn't identify in that way? Have you personally lived that's been different? But also, what have you seen in general on motherhood across the globe?
Well, that's such a loaded question, Isra, and just not from my personal lived experience, but also the experiences that I've heard from other, Black women, across the UK, across the globe, that definitely echo my experiences. I'm sure you already know the data that, Black women, Black mothers are faced with. We're more likely in the UK at the moment. We are 3.4 times more likely to sadly die in our pregnancies. Our babies have an increased risk of being born stillborn, neonatal deaths, miscarriages, hypertension. We're more likely to have perinatal mental health challenges, the least likely to get support, most likely to get emergency C-sections. I mean, I can literally list where we are more likely to have poorer outcomes, disparities. And that has been a lot of my experiences, not all, but many of my experiences. My experience as a mother, first-time mother with my first daughter, going through postnatal depression and not seeking clinical support for that because of the fear that I faced as a Black woman who knew that I would come across stigma, judgment, and taboo of saying that I need help, or I need support, or I'm struggling, or I'm feeling super anxious, and knowing that I will be perceived in a particular way because of my complexion and my color, and knowing that the data is stacked up against me, so that even if I did have the confidence and the boldness 9 years ago to ask for support, or actually numbers show that they don't necessarily have my best interest at heart. And so navigating my way as a mother, 9 years ago, and even now, knowing that, my lived experiences of wanting to be the best mother that I could possibly be, but trying to balance that with maintaining my social life, my identity, my career, whilst knowing that the data shows that actually we're more likely to have more negative experiences, and thinking, who can I turn to for support, and saying, actually, I am strong enough to manage and carry this challenge. But then knowing that again, Black women are more likely to be perceived as stronger, harder, can bear more pain, and so that juxtaposition of feeling conflicted between the way that I am feeling and the way that I'm perceived, and all of these different challenges can make the experience very overwhelming. And that's why I choose to really be mindful of what I digest, what advice I listen to, but also, again, psych myself up to feel empowered to know that I can do this journey. And I have done it. And I've proven that I'm a wonderful mother and I can have a positive experience despite what society, the media, the healthcare says about me.
And I think you talked about a lot of different interesting points. One is that the environment is really what informs the experience for Black moms, right? And how when you knew you needed help, were literally considering not asking for help and not seeking support because of what would people say about me in the perception, and would it fall into the same stereotypes that we've seen for Black moms and Black women in particular. And I think that that is detrimental to someone's psyche and spirit, right? And especially when going through this experience is one of the most challenging ones. Unless you're in it, you're never going to know what it feels like. And for you to have to consider, well, am I playing into stereotypes that people are conditioned to believe about Black women just by asking for help? I think it's an injustice, and I also think that it means that we failed as collectively as a community globally to be able to address those needs. But I know that your experience is not unique, unfortunately, and that racism really drives so much of the outcomes for Black moms. And that's just something that we all need to continue to speak up against. And this is why having you on this podcast is so important, because we want to, as every pregnancy, uplift your voices and also talk about these things and name them and confront them as challenges for us. One question I had for you is, what do you think drives these inequities and these disparities, Sandra?
I mean, you said it just now, that word, the R word, racism. And I say the R word because many years ago, when I tried to speak about what covert or overt racism looked like, I was definitely shunned. I was told to not speak openly about the role that race plays in maternal health outcomes,
Wow.
in the motherhood experience. I was told that. I was told that actually it might jeopardize your career, that you don't want to be seen as that, angry Black woman who's always speaking about race. And I did it and I took a risk. And I'm so glad that, 9, 10 years on later, more people are speaking about it. There are a lot more advocacy groups, people and platforms that are now naming what is one of the main causes, not the only cause, but a main cause or contributing factor is racism. Believing that a Black woman can bear more pain. I mean, I was the co-chair of the UK's national inquiry into racial injustice in maternity care, led by a charity called Birthrights. And I, heard so many accounts of and experiences of Black women saying that they were denied pain relief in their labor experience. Likewise, with my experience, I was denied pain relief. And that notion of Black women not needing pain relief, meaning that we're stronger, we can bear more pain, is inherently racist, being perceived as your cries and your pain not being taken seriously. Again, like that happened to me as well. I explained that I felt my baby, coming, I was in pain, and they told me to go home 5 times. And that notion of, she's fine or she's exaggerating her pain, stereotypes, not taking our concerns seriously, not understanding some of how we present our symptoms, and or not spotting them because of our darker skin tone. So, for example, many babies that I've come into contact with through mothers' accounts, jaundice wasn't picked up, and it was because their skin was darker. But why in 2025 are we still using that as an excuse?
Yes.
Every mother should be on the receiving end of healthcare practitioners and staff that are medically equipped and educated to spot signs and symptoms in different skin tones across the board, so that we have better outcomes as a whole.
That's so important, and I'm so glad that you are also naming it and saying it as it is. Like, in 2025, how are we still even addressing and seeing that Black moms are more vulnerable and more likely to die from completely preventable complications in pregnancy and childbirth? And we not only are we not talking about it, but we're not addressing it. And these are things that we must address. And this is why creating spaces like this is important to have these conversations, but it's also then coupling that with action and what you've been able to build for yourself and in the UK for maternal health is incredibly inspiring. So I would love to ask you a little bit more about the Motherhood Group and its mission and how you came to found it. And then after that, I want to hear a bit more about this app that I think that you've built. And that's so exciting. Now you also being a queen on the tech side of things. That's amazing. Please. Yes, Sandra.
Oh,
All
thank
the
you.
love.
So do you know what? I actually created the Motherhood Group out of anger. Yes, I was an angry Black woman. I was angry and needed a safe space. So I
Mm.
started Googling, support groups, Black mothers, and all these different kind of keywords on Google. And I couldn't find any platforms or spaces specifically targeted towards Black mothers who had like negative experiences or wanted some sort of community to I guess air grievances, and I couldn't find them in the UK. I could find a few in America. I feel like America has been quite a bit more advanced when it comes to Black maternal health outcomes. And this was 9, 10 years ago. And so I set up a WhatsApp group called the Motherhood Group, and it grew very quickly. We started having events, workshops, lunches, brunches, but really the common theme was the need for community, the need for a safe space, and the need to know that actually our challenges are shared, and also the space to discuss the role that racism and race played a part in our maternal experiences, motherhood journey, but also healthcare, journey as well. And we've grown dramatically over the last couple of years. We've gone from just focusing solely on safe spaces and community integration and support and peer network to training NHS, which is National Health Service in the
Yep.
UK, training midwives and doctors and obstetricians and practitioners on understanding cultural nuances for Black mothers and using lived experiences, coming directly from the mothers who are mostly impacted to say, this is what we want, this is how we'd like to receive care, and do it so that we can lower disparities. We've also set up, research reports to say, we've studied this over the last 9 years. Now we are handing it over to the powers that be to make those changes and to set targets. We also work quite closely with the government in the UK, and we're sitting on task force and investigations to really listen to the voices, because very often we talk about, what Black mothers need and what, but we don't really listen directly to the actual issues. And now we have created that digital platform. The idea came many years ago when I also downloaded so many platforms. And I found it very comforting to know that other mothers were going through challenges too, but I could not relate to most of the women and pregnant mothers on those platforms. I was usually the most youngest and the only Black women. And I just wanted to feel that sense of familiarity. And so I set up the idea to one day launch an app that would connect mums with each other, but also provide culturally competent support. So now we have a platform that's got over 7,000 mothers that have downloaded the app in just a
Wow.
few months.
That's
And they
amazing.
receive, thank you so
7,000 in just a
much.
few months? That's
In a
incredible.
few months, we launched this year, and it just shows that the appetite has always been there. And there are, again, some platforms that are amazing as well, but they haven't been specifically targeted to providing Black mothers with on-demand live support. We provide group sessions, counseling, antenatal classes, and a match and swipe function to meet other mothers that have similar lived experiences as you. So if you're going through a C-section and the mother's gone through the same thing, you can literally tap on her profile and talk to her. It's very simple, but it's very needed.
I love that. What's the name of the app, Sandra?
It's called Black Mums App, and it's very direct. And
Love it.
people are like, oh, why would you name it that? Because it literally is a platform for and by Black mothers. And as it evolves and changes and grows, we may look at changing some of the key functions and possibly the name. But right now, it is named what it does, connects Black
Yeah.
mothers together. So,
And
yeah.
I love that it's such a focused mission because, like you said, there are so many spaces for expecting moms, right? And so many community groups and Reddit threads. But I also felt like when I was pregnant, I was disconnected from a lot of the lived experience as like a Muslim woman and different cultural nuances. And I'm also Arab American. And I did feel like there was a disconnect. Like, where are other moms like me with the same experience as me, right? Wearing hijab means different experience in the birthing room, means who can be in the room versus not. And even in the postpartum phase, to be able to talk to a community that understood and related to me, right, from the faith perspective or from the cultural perspective, I think would have been tremendously helpful. And oftentimes I was seeking out this information and this knowledge, which is a burden in itself for a mom to be carrying, right? And a pregnant mom, an expecting mom, with all the other anxieties and worries that she has, to think through, how am I going to find a place where I belong? And a place that makes me feel that I feel supported, so that when I do have this experience, or when after birth and the recovery, who do I talk to? Who can I rely on? Because sometimes it's really hard, right, to find that support. Even if you have the most supportive family and friends, not everyone gets your experience. And so part of being able to create a space like that, which I think you did with this amazing app, and clearly it's resonating with so many people, is to be able to have that community that says, "Hey, we see you, sis, right? And we want to support you, and you're not alone. And what you're going through is not unique. It's not an exception. You're normal. You're okay." And I think that that in itself is so powerful. One thing that I wanted to also uplift, Sandra, was when you talked about the training and the cultural nuances and how important that is, language and culture
Yes.
and the lived experiences of women. At every pregnancy, one of the major challenges that we recognized in the maternal health landscape globally is that over 60% of the maternal deaths, right, that are completely preventable in pregnancy and in childbirth are taking place and against women who are living in crisis affected settings that are the hardest to reach. And it's not what you would only assume, right? Like the genocide in Gaza, or the
Mhm.
specific like floods that take place, or earthquakes. Like those, of course, add the natural disaster, the humanitarian crisis, add an extra element of challenge and difficulty, 100%. But we're also talking about places in Nigeria that are not well
Yes.
connected to the grid, or places in Somalia or in Syria. And like it really is a universal issue. Even in the United States, we have maternal mortality rates that should not be happening in a country like ours, right? With all the access and the resources and the privilege that we have. So one of the things that we notice is that, okay, how are we really reaching those moms and babies who need that care the most in those areas? And how are we reaching them in a way that is actually impactful? Because you can go in with an aid organization, right? And we know the big multilateral organizations, the big NGOs, and say, we're going to go and we're going to serve this community. But the problem is with a lot of these organizations is they parachute in, and then they do that Band-Aid delivery service and they parachute right out, leaving the community to be on a constant need and dependence for this type of aid. And for every pregnancy, we completely stand against that model. And so for us, we're not an implementing organization, but what we are is we have incredible partners, over 50 organizations now, 50, including many in the UK, who are frontline implementers, who are in the hardest to reach areas, but they are indigenous to these areas and these lands and these people. So the people that are implementing the programs, the people that are there on the ground, midwives that are delivering these moms, traditional birthing assistants, all of them are part of this ecosystem of our partners who believe and understand the cultural nuances, the language, the sensitivities, and have the trust of the community in which they're operating. And so the context in which they operate in Pakistan will be 100% different from how they're going to be
Yes.
operating in Gaza or Nigeria or wherever it may be, because it's custom tailored to those communities. And so I really appreciate that one of the things that you've done with the Motherhood Group is that you are training people to understand that moms are not a monolith, that you can't just have a cookie cutter approach to how you are addressing maternal health with them, and that without the training and deep knowledge on the cultural nuances, you are actually contributing to more harm than good. Any thoughts on that?
I would like to clap.
You were like,
You
"Okay, I love that. Thank
honestly
you."
perfectly said. And that's such an important point, is that there has to be a deep knowledge, a deep level of understanding, but also a desire to want to understand. And
Absolutely.
it doesn't even have to be so complicated. A lot of the time, when we speak to mothers, all they want is to feel like they are on the receiving end of empathy, kindness.
Mm,
And these are softer approaches that everyone should be able to do, but sadly, it's not often done. And we understand that there are, stretched staff and not enough people on the wards, or people that have that space to provide that specific, tailored, bespoke care. But I think kindness, empathy, care, respect, dignity, these are all human rights principles
absolutely.
and frameworks that should allow everybody to have equitable care and their basic human rights met. So when we're looking at maternal health care for all, including Black mothers, and training related to that, we're looking at allowing mothers to have their basic human rights met. And that's when we look at it from a human rights principle, then we can say, actually, these are necessities. They're not, they shouldn't be add-ons. There shouldn't
Yes.
be, bespoke training modules. This should be mandatory, and this should be a right given to every person stepping into maternal care and healthcare as a whole. So yeah.
Absolutely. It should be fundamental. And no matter where a mom is born, what she identifies as, the circumstances in which she finds herself in, which we know are so out of her control. But the fact that there are
Yes.
moms that are just more prone to die because of where they currently live right now is
Mm.
ludicrous in the world that we're living in today. And we always say that, our motto every pregnancy is that every pregnancy, of course, that is wanted should be safe. And every single mom deserves that same level of care. And back to what you were saying, it's also about giving her that agency, that she has autonomy and agency for how she wants to be treated in the experience that she wants. And we shouldn't doubt that or diminish that or even try to change that. And I feel like oftentimes with women of color and Black women in particular, the society wants to change and wants to force them
Mhm.
into how to act and how to behave and what to want
Yes.
for themselves. And it's like that in itself is the problem and the crux of the issue. Because once you respect people as human
Yeah.
beings and you respect their agency, so much of that goes away, right?
Definitely, I think autonomy and agency is such an important aspect of the maternal journey. And in fact, with my first pregnancy, when I was giving birth, and after begging and pleading for pain relief, and when they said, "Okay, we're
Mm.
going to issue you an epidural," the anaesthetist refused to give me because I kept crying. And
Oh
she
my
left the
God.
room and said, "Until you stop crying, then I will issue it to you." And that replays in my head, even 9.5 years on, that trauma,
Wow.
that not being able to have agency to even shed tears, to cry, to feel and show my pain in itself.
In
It's such
childbirth. In
in
childbirth.
childbirth, the
The most
one time
painful
I'm allowed to
experience.
scream. Yeah.
Yeah. That is horrible.
It's just crazy. And I wish I had the voice that I have now then, because oh my goodness, I would have said a lot more. But I you know, finally held in my tears and, behaved strong and stiff and for enough for her to be able to issue it. She came back in, and that in itself, again, it stripped me away from my autonomy and my agency. And I think,
Mm,
sadly, women of color, Black women, are not generally allowed to feel, to
mhm.
be, to express. And that goes for across life, really, not just in healthcare, but you see it trickle into healthcare, maternity care, and motherhood as well. This is why when I speak on my platforms, when I'm getting interviewed or speaking to mothers, I'm always saying that you are multifaceted as a Black woman. You can, if you would like to be strong or resilient in this season or in this space, do it. And if you would like to cry and show vulnerability and ask for support, do it. We are allowed to just be and express and show all aspects of
Exactly.
ourselves. And that's how we can humanize ourselves.
Absolutely. And the experience that you had really like it triggered something in me. Like I felt like goosebumps when you were sharing that
Mm.
because I do think that that is such a challenging situation to be in. And I like I said, if you haven't been in this situation, you haven't been in a place where you feel like my voice, my opinion right now does not matter. And it's an experience that I'm undergoing myself. It is so demoralizing and it really takes a toll on people. So I'm not surprised at all that you are feeling still the trauma of that moment, that when you replay it, you probably have a lot of emotions of resent that are built in that moment saying, how could someone lack basic empathy, but also tried to take away my agency, a stranger whose job was to provide a service and care for me. So I think like this is such an important point. And to that, what would your message be to Black moms in particular who find themselves in situations like that and want to know how to navigate and be able to feel confident in their voice and using that in those moments to say, hey, no, this is my right. This is my agency. I'm not going to allow you to change that.
Yeah, I would say that you are allowed to be visible. And I say that because the Motherhood Group, we have an annual awareness week in the UK every September, and it's coming up in about 2 weeks. And our awareness week is called Black Maternal Mental Health Week UK. And this year's theme is Make Black Mothers Visible.
I love that.
And it's getting everybody, our allies, our stakeholders, community organization, mothers, healthcare practitioners to join in with our campaign to make Black mothers visible. And no, it's not because we want to be vain or we want to be loud, even if that's a byproduct. It's to say you are allowed to be seen in totality
Yeah.
and you have a voice and you are allowed to use it, and your voice can and should be amplified. Many of the cases that I've come across from mothers who have gone through birth trauma or postpartum depression or anxiety and have not received help has been because they felt silenced or were silenced. And so when we have the theme of Make Black Mothers Visible, it's to almost shine a spotlight to all of the issues and the challenges, but also in raising awareness, you're also helping to elevate the voices that have often felt marginalized, silenced, or not important. We are important. Every mother's important,
Yep.
including Black mothers. And I just want that to be drilled into Black mothers, consciousness, but also everyone as well.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And thank you for that, Sandra. Sandra, how has the policy world been around this issue, especially in the UK? You were talking about the numbers earlier in the data, obviously showing a clear disparity for Black moms in the UK in particular. And you've done a lot of advocacy with the Motherhood Group. How have you been able to see that influence and what the landscape is? It more receptive to changing their ways and policies on maternal health care, or are you still finding challenges? If you could talk a little bit more about that.
Historically, over the last 9 years, it did feel quite not a priority. There were not targets set in place to lower these disparities, but thank goodness, as of
Mm.
recent, with the new Labour government, taking the lead, we have Wes Streeting, who is the Health Secretary of State, made an announcement about 2 months ago that he's setting up a task force and investigation around maternal disparities, and they are making it's a mission to include Black maternal health. And I'm so pleased that the Motherhood Group
Mm.
is involved or has been asked to be involved in this.
That's
And
great.
that means we are, taking as taking stage and taking a seat at the table. And actually, as part of our annual awareness week, we are inviting Black mothers to Parliament, to House of Commons, to
Amazing.
have our voices amplified. We just released our platform yesterday, and we've already had over 150 signups in a day. And that just shows you there is appetite for Black mothers to have a position in Parliament, in policy, and to have a say. But now we need them to not just listen to us, because it's great that they're listening now, but to implement and turn this into actionable goals, targets, to really, really say we are listening and we are making and we're putting in place new policies that can hold those to account, that can make these changes, but also more of a punitive action. Are there punishments for those who don't offer support or aren't proactive when Black mothers are raising concerns and they're
Mm.
being dismissed or they're being sent home or they're being treated differently based on the color of their skin? Are we holding these people to account? There
Yeah,
needs to be a lot
absolutely.
more of that type of conversation.
And accountability measures in place. First of all, congratulations on getting the needle to move on the policy space. As you can see in the United States, it's almost impossible and it feels
Oh,
really
yeah.
heavy when you feel like this is helpless. We are screaming into the abyss and no one is listening and things aren't changing. So it makes me so happy. And I think it's a good point for our listeners to know that there are places in the world where this type of advocacy is being successful. And of course, it hasn't solved all the problems immediately because
Mhm.
a lot of these are so structural and systemic
Yes.
that they will take time. But you're right. It's all about opening the doors, not just listening, but then, okay, what are we going to take with this information? How are we going to improve the systems and improve the livelihoods of Black moms? And I love that you're doing an advocacy day because I've done a lot of those in my career, and I think that it feels very powerful for someone to come and actually say what they want to the face of someone who's supposed to represent them as as a constituent and someone who's supposed to have that influence and that authority to be able to say, hey, this is my story and this should matter to you. And this is why you were elected into office. And, there's accountability on you to do something about this issue. Because if you don't, moms will continue to die from completely preventable reasons. And it's just a shame that our governments don't all do whatever they can, especially when it's so preventable, to just solve this crisis across the globe. But I'm glad to see that a lot of movement is happening in the UK. Sandra, I would love to hear more about like your stance and your perspective on collaboration and coalition building in particular. I think a lot of times the one of the challenges that we also notice as every pregnancy in the maternal health landscape is that efforts are often siloed. And that includes where organizations will just work in specific regions, funders will give funding just for specific causes. And oftentimes, a lot of organizations that are doing the exact same support or work for maternal health are not coordinating, they're not talking to each other. And so there's duplicating efforts and then ultimately lessening the impact. And then you have organizations who just want to stick to just maternal health groups and people who identify like they do. And that in itself is, to me, another silo that we're operating in. So, what is your thought around silos and how have you been able to break that with the Motherhood Group and the different advocacy projects that you take on?
We're still learning to break that, if I'm being honest, Israel. But
I love that. I love it's a
I'm just being
process, okay? It's
transparent.
a process.
It's a process. I think it's the same issue in the UK. I think it might be a global issue at this point
Mm,
of working in silos. And I think there is so much power in collaboration, in partnership, in working together, in there being a collective voice. The issue I think that I've seen, especially in the UK, especially around Black grassroots organizations, there is quite a bit of competition. And it's because
mm.
for many years, Black women have felt like there's only enough space for one. For one, there's only space for one of us to sit at that table. But we need to show that we can create our own table. We can
Yes, yes.
make our
Say that
table,
louder, Sandra. Create
right?
our own table, please.
Like we can create our own table and invite those to our table. But we need to work together to build this table. They can only be built if we hold hands and do it together. It's a struggle and I understand why, but I'm definitely for partnerships, collaborations, working together and finding strengths. If this group's strength is, more in this region and that group's strengths in this region, then let's work together and maybe focus on particular areas around health, maternal health, Black maternal health equity, inequalities. And then we can then say, this is a powerhouse movement. There's still a lot of work to be done. And I think it's a mindset that needs to be reshifted. And
Absolutely.
also power imbalance as well. I've personally found that um, it's the white-led organizations that will invite us to their table. And as much as we know that they have access to network spaces, funders, platforms, people, there needs to be a conversation as how can we, restructure these power imbalances so that we as in Black maternal health organizations really do have a real say and a real voice, not just puppets or a tick box exercise.
Right.
That's
And
a
how are
convo for
you
another day.
we can keep talking about it now. I think this is one of the feisty part of this, the spicy part of this podcast. But what I'll tell you is like, it's true. Like, how are we leading the agenda? Not just pieces on the agenda or parts on the agenda. And
Mm.
that goes to the fact that oftentimes when we talk about moms and migrant moms or Black moms or women of color, all of it is always like statistics. Well, here's what the data
Yes.
shows. And it's like, how about you start humanizing us and recognizing that we're not statistics on a piece of paper, that these are real lives, that every single mom that is dying from preventable complications is loved, has so many people that care for her, has a life that she's built, and in a second, it's gone. All because of lack of access or lack of support or lack of agency that was not given to her in that moment. And that in itself, like to me, is one of the biggest travesties of life today. And then you have on the other side where we're conditioned to believe, as women of color, that we have to almost justify our existence and
Mm.
justify why we should be at the table and almost like literally overcompensate and say, look, I'm smart, I'm talented, I can speak well, therefore I should be at the table. But why is it that we always have to feel that we're in that position to where like we're almost like, yeah, please tokenize me sometimes, right? So at least will get me in the room at the table if you
Woo.
tokenize me, because we know that's what people are doing to us. But it's like, how do we also teach ourselves, Sandra, to not fall into that? And one thing I'll just say about this is that in the Muslim community, what I've noticed is a lot of people want to be the first Muslim woman to do X, the first Muslim woman who is this and that. And sister, I am so proud of any Muslim woman who is shutting down stereotypes, breaking through barriers, shattering glass ceilings. Like, let's all the power to you. If you are the first Muslim to do anything, shout out to you. But we cannot be using those titles and conditioning ourselves to believe that that's what makes us valuable to the world. And that's what makes us valuable to these
Wow.
conversations. And this is something that
Wow.
literally is so deeply ingrained and conditioned that we almost feel like we have to stand out from our own to be recognized by those who are now in the seats of power. But truly our problem is that we should be trying to disrupt the seats of power and shift that away from where it is now. Give me your thoughts, Sandra. I know. I'm
Wow.
like, that was a mic drop. Everybody, that was a mic drop in the
Mic
podcast
drop
room.
and and definitely spicy. Oh my gosh.
I like
No, I completely agree. I think we just have to be honest with ourselves. We know that it can be. We speak about not being a statistic or tokenism or not being a tick box exercise, but we know that we almost have to wear that to get through the door, to
Yep.
get the opportunity. Inadvertently, it does make a change. I know that when you wear that particular title or label or fit in that box, it helps you get through the door. But once you get through the door, what are you doing with that? Are you still playing the game, or are you taking a I know that I got to where I've gotten to because I have been bold in saying and telling my truth, even when I was told to not speak about the race thing. Don't play the race card. That's what I was told initially. And now more people are doing it because it's more acceptable. But when you get into those spaces, what are you doing with that? And that's what we need to be honest, honest with. Are we still playing the game, or are we making a difference? And are we telling the truth?
And are we busting out the
I'm willing
doors?
to.
Are we busting down the doors so
Are
everybody else
we
can come right in?
kicking the doors down? Are we
Yeah.
kicking? Are we kicking the doors down? And that's
Take
what
it
we
to the
should be aiming
rubbish.
to do.
Take those
Yes.
doors out to the rubbish. I said it good, right? That's your British.
Yes. Rubbish.
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 That's hilarious. Wow, I can't believe I just tried to be British on my podcast and now
You've done
everyone is
quite
gonna hear
well.
this. Well, thank you. That's a compliment. I don't know if that's real or not, but that's
Quite well.
okay.
How's my accent, Isra? Take it to the trash can.
Oh my God, that's
No?
perfect American. It was like you had me fooled for a second. Trash can, yep, just like that. Listen, Sandra, let's switch
I feel like you're being
places for a
sarcastic.
day and just take the world by storm. Isra in the UK and Sandra over here in the US. I was just in the UK, Sandra, by the way. Like I just got back like 2 weeks ago. I was there for a week. The Every Pregnancy team, we did a convening and we were in London, Birmingham, and Manchester. And we went and met with all
Manchester.
the different Muslim maternal health organizations. And we talked to all of them about every pregnancy, and they all joined our coalition. So we had one of the most successful weeks of advocacy where every organization that sees the power of a coalition like ours and recognizes that we're trying to break down these silos and trying to amplify the voice and the mission of saving moms and babies' lives everywhere and anywhere, they all want to join in that mission. But I realize a lot of it is creating the structure and creating an engaged way for them to feel that they are incentivized, that they are part of something bigger. But a lot of that takes a lot of work. So I can only imagine what you're building with the Motherhood Group. It takes a lot because you care about the moms that you're bringing to the table. You care about the organizations that you're partnering with. And ultimately, you have that long-term vision of like, we're here to save Black moms' lives everywhere. And so I'm really proud of what you've been doing. And I love to hear all of that. And a question I have for you too is how can policymakers do better? Like you said, listen to us, great. Be held accountable, great. Is there anything specific that's happening in the UK policy landscape right now? Is there legislation that people are talking about? Is there extra funding that they can be driving to this? Even like an analysis of, I think, hospitals in the UK where Black moms are dying is like the investigation to that piece. Are there reports that are going to be coming out? Policy changes, sort of like what are you thinking is like the actual tangible action some of these people can take?
Yeah, definitely anti-racism training. I don't want to hear
I like
another unconscious bias
oh
training. It's
god.
a term that's often used. Unconscious, as if someone's sleeping when they are
She
repeatedly.
did not say sleeping. That's what they say also for, like, Muslim training. It's like they
What
call
is
you a
that?
terrorist, and they're like, "Oh, that's
Unconscious.
unconscious bias." I'm like, "How is calling me a terrorist unconscious?" I'm just wondering. Can
That's
someone explain that to me?
crazy.
That is very
And we've
conscious.
and we've normalized we've normalized that type of language. Even I am guilty of saying that just because I learned that that's what everyone else was saying. But when you actually think about it, when somebody is being harmful repeatedly, dismissing the concerns of Black, brown, Muslim, mixed women, that's not unconscious. That's not by accident. That is specific, targeted, repeated, data shown. So it can't be called unconscious anymore.
Mm.
Anti-racism training, let's call it what it is, and let's make it more proactive, and let's make it mandatory. Let's not make it an addition or a plus, and that needs to be backed by funding. Everyone's afraid to talk about money.
Mm.
Everyone's afraid to talk about the cost,
Yep.
but it does take a cost to implement this, and there has to be ring fence funding for this to be a priority, and therefore for there to be change. And it has to go to the groups, individuals that can actually make the difference, that already have that trust built with the community that's being affected. And that's not what I've seen so far. And there's still that control. There's a lot of control issues, and it's like a fear of relinquishing control to community groups, to Black led organizations that have made a difference,
That's such
even
a
without the
powerful point.
funding.
Such a powerful
Yeah.
point. So you just reminded me of a horrible experience that I clearly tried to hide and bury deep down. But it was when I was actually at one of my jobs and we had a training for Islamophobia. And the trainer was this like white woman. And I was like, oh Lord, first of all, like not a
Oh my
Muslim,
gosh.
not
Oh
a
my.
someone tied to the community in any way, shape, or form. And she comes in and her first slide, like I kid you not, was images of Muslim women completely like head to toe black burqa. And I was in the room. So I was like, hello, ma'am. Do you see me? Like, do you see that I'm a Muslim
Hello.
woman? And I know that you're not seeing eyeliner as good as mine on this video or this photo. I know that like we are fashionistas with the modest fashion world that we're in. And yet all you could produce is this imagery of a Muslim woman. And then you want to come and have the audacity, right? To actually teach me about Islamophobia. And I remember in that room how small I felt and how I felt
Oh,
that the whole training missed the mark. Because the mark of this training and the mark of what we're actually talking about for the sake of this podcast is changing language, changing behavior,
mm,
is about
mm,
understanding the lived experience. And if you cannot understand lived experience because you cannot relate to it from your identities and your privilege, then please step aside and give the platform and the funding to people and organizations that are directly impacted, that know exactly
mhm.
the solutions for their communities, and that are better equipped to train and educate everybody on that. And that's where you're going to see the impact. I actually went and filed a complaint after that training saying that I personally felt
Good.
uncomfortable and completely disregarded for my lived experience in that room. And it was crazy to think that these are organizations that are, right, multi-million dollar NGOs that have the resources, should have the basic common sense, and supposedly fight for, right, fight against inequality everywhere. And so we're seeing this across the globe, I think, and you're right, that we need to like name this also. So if you're an organization listening to this, if you are a company, if you are someone that has influence over a group of people in any way, you
Mm,
must
mm.
commit to doing these bias trainings and this anti-racism trainings. You must commit to them. You must commit to hiring and investing in the right trainers. Just like Sandra, by the way, I'm going to plug her in, hire her, and do this the right way, because if you
Yeah,
don't, you are only perpetuating this harmful cycle, and it will never change the way that the community behaves.
agreed. 100% agreed. There needs to be a wider conversation about what and who's delivering this training, and is it creating more harm, or is it actually making a difference, a positive difference? So
Absolutely, and
definitely
you'll be
agree with
able to
that.
see that. I'm sure that if you gave a training to a hospital and all the OB/GYNs and the midwives, I guarantee you that they are going to treat Black women so much better after hearing from you and what you would have to offer
Um,
versus anyone else, and
thank
so
you.
that's the impact that you have, and I'm so glad that people can actually learn from you and seek that resource from you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, we've been doing it for 8 years now, and there
It's
has been
amazing.
a difference. But it, thank you.
So, what can listeners do, Sandra, to advocate for Black mothers and for better maternal mental health care, which is another, I think, really important topic that you brought up in the conversation today?
Yeah, there's definitely a link between maternal health, mortality rates, mental health, birth trauma,
Mm,
and it needs to be brought into the conversation a lot more. Black women are more likely to struggle with postnatal depression, anxiety, only getting support when they're brought in at crisis mode, meaning they're dragged in to see a practitioner. There needs to be another nuanced conversation about how that looks, what that looks like, and how Black women are presenting themselves if we are more likely to, not get that support or access. Why is that? Are we presenting perfection? Are we looking stronger? Are we not allowed to feel vulnerable? So there needs to be that type of conversation, but also we need to amplify the voices of Black mothers. And when we look at what allyship looks like, it's not just, you know, saying, I know what you've gone through, but actually speaking for, helping to elevate the voices of Black women. And many times I've come across fantastic practitioners who can understand and empathize, but they're too afraid as well to speak up amongst it in their circle or in a hospital. In the inquiry, we saw that Black healthcare practitioners were more likely to be put on penalized or put on punitive
wow.
action for also. So the racism that trickles from service users to staff and healthcare practitioners as well. And so allyship is another conversation that needs to be discussed on supporting and helping in healthcare setting and outside as well.
And contributing positively to that ecosystem, which is so important. So, Sandra, how can people follow the work that you're doing? How can they stay connected?
Yeah, follow on Instagram, the Motherhood Group. And then on my personal page, it's Sandy Igwe, SandEEIGWE. And then we have our website, themotherhoodgroup.org, Black Mums app. You can download it on iOS, Android. It's literally Black Mums, or just type in the Motherhood Group and get involved in our campaigns, our training, our conferences. We have the UK's largest Black maternal health conference in the UK, and we're planning our next one. We'll be having 800 attendees,
Wow.
and it's really a space of community connection, but also inviting those that do have decision making powers into our space as well, into our table that we've created.
And when is that
Really, really,
conference?
that's going to be happening in March, but we start planning from
Amazing.
now because we just finished the last one, and we had Diane Abbott, who was the first ever Black female MP in the UK, who
Amazing.
opened up part of our conference. It was fantastic.
So powerful, and I definitely will continue to support, and we as Every Pregnancy are so honored to be connected to the Motherhood Group now and working together and uplifting the insanely inspiring stories of resilience and courage and having those tough conversations to hold people accountable, whether it be political officials and policymakers, or the community, or the healthcare workers and advocates who are all in these rooms and in the spaces that we're in. I think that you had such an incredible story that you shared with us today. And I really, really just want to thank you, Sandra, for your vulnerability, for your calls to action, for the amazing work that you've inspired me with today. And also, I'm sure everyone who's listening to this. And of course, you all heard how you can stay in touch with Sandra and follow her work. We'll drop all of those links in our episode notes. Sandra, thank you again for all your time today. Please follow us if you're listening to this and you love this episode. Follow our podcast, and you can listen to it on any platform where you can hear a podcast. Follow at Every Pregnancy on social media channels, and check out everypregnancy.org to also continue to support the work that the organizations in our coalition are doing and uplift the work of people just like Sandra. Thank you all so much for joining us today and for committing to do everything that you can to make every pregnancy safe. Thank you, Sandra, again for joining us on Born Into, and that's a wrap.